Hey, y'all, I'm Bud Elliott, and this is my college football summer school series on Cover 3. I bring on the team experts from the 24/7 sports staff and ask them the questions I care about. No fluff. Which players will be toughest to replace? What position groups are sneakily better or worse than I realize? We get you the scoop on each team in 20 minutes or less. Let's go. Hey, guys, Bud Elliott here, and welcome back to my college football summer school on the Cover 3 podcast. Today, we're going to talk Kentucky, and to do that, I'm going to bring in Aaron Gershon of CatsPause. Aaron, welcome to the show.
I appreciate you having me back.
Absolutely. So I'm excited to talk a little Wildcat football here. I've got my stats pulled up, and I'll just start firing away with some questions. So last year, Kentucky slipped a good bit.
Yeah.
They, power ratings wise, kind of mid 30s for me. And that sounds great if you look historically at Kentucky, but given the recent standard that Mark Stoops had established, a little bit of a slip there. And the split in offense defense was, I guess we can say thank God for Iowa, right? Because otherwise that might have been the one of the biggest offense defense splits in the country. 97th in offense, 4th in defense. If you look at Bill Connolly's numbers, what does it feel like a missed opportunity to have Will Levis and have him go out like that?
It does. Will Levis obviously just second pick of the second round, great talent. And last year, the talent around him just wasn't good enough. And I think the receiver room was better than advertised, but there were a lot of young guys, 2 freshmen leading the way in there. And the offensive line was a disaster. And I think everyone kind of overlooked the loss of 3 NFL guys, especially Luke Fortner, a center now starting for the Jacksonville Jaguars. The divisional round of the playoffs. So everyone kind of overlooked how bad the offense, including myself, how bad the offensive line was just going to be. And it was even worse than anyone could have imagined, allowing 47 sacks, which was the second most among Power 5. Only Boston College was worse. So you don't really want to be with Boston College. No offense to them in that category. So yeah, it was a mess, but the defense was outstanding, and they were still able to win 7 games, which is not what they want to do at this point in the Mark Stoops era. They've won 10 games twice. They had an 8-win season, with no quarterback, really. Lynn Bowden was playing quarterback. So, they're past that. They're past just getting to bowl games, which they've done in 7 straight years. That's not good enough here. So, and they were picked to finish second in the East. They finally got that respect they were kind of calling for and wanting, and, they didn't deliver. So now it's kind of back to trying to go prove yourselves, and obviously not having Will Levis back hurts, but I think they did pretty well with the replacement they're bringing in for him.
I know on Cover 3 we sounded the alarm bells. Was it Miami, Ohio they played early last season?
First game of the year.
God, yeah. This is bad. They really can't block Miami, Ohio. And
nope.
Granted, like Chuck Martin has a great defense that they run there with Joe Bowen and those guys. But if you can't block Miami, Ohio, you're going to have a difficult time in the SEC. So they're fortunate to bring back Liam Cohen, who I think meshed with the players quite a bit. We don't really need to get into why the outgoing OC didn't work, but it's clear he didn't. What changes do you think you'll see with Cohen?
I think you're going to see more of a balanced attack. I think last year they, at one point, just got away from throwing the ball downfield. They got away from the things they do really well, which is, run the ball when they need to, but also they were able in 2021 to have explosive plays. There was not much explosive plays going on last year. And I think this year, with Barryon Brown back for a second year experience under his belt, Dane Key, who set the freshman receiving record at touchdown record at Kentucky last year. Brown set the receiving yards record. I think you're going to see more, downfield play, especially with Devin Leary. And, Rich Scangarello last year definitely got a bit of a raw deal because Will Levis was not healthy at all. He was not himself. And the guy he was in 21 and 22, it's unfair to almost compare. It was just it was a mess. And the offensive line was a mess. But this year, I think you're going to see a lot more downplay. I think you're going to see the ball get spread out a lot more. And I think you're going to have a better offensive line. I don't know how. I think it'll be better than last year, meaning half the sacks, but I don't think it's going to be an elite offensive line by any means. So I think you're going to be able to run the ball more effectively. But last year they were just behind the chains and they didn't have enough time to even protect the quarterback to throw deep. So it was a lot of short passes, a lot of wide receiver screen was probably the most run play of the season. So I think you're going to get a lot of that eliminated.
So last year in the games, Levis was hurt and missed, and certainly he played some games where he was clearly hurt, but battled through it. Ole Miss comes to mind. Yeah. In the games in which the backups had to play, Dustin Wade and Kaya Sharon, they were just by any measure terrible. A 30% success rate on dropbacks, whereas Levis was 45. So basically unplayable. And so Kentucky goes out and gets Devin Leary from NC State, who himself had a kind of a poor year, but he got hurt. and has a much better track record. What have you seen? What have you heard about him so far in his short time at Kentucky?
Accurate. I think that's the big thing, right? I mean, Will Levis, his one flaw was turning the ball over. And you look at Devin Leary when he was healthy in 21, 35 to 5 touchdown to pick ratio. That's insane. And when we got to see him on the practice field this spring, that's the biggest thing you saw is he makes all the throws accurately. There's more touch on his ball than with Will, where Will had an NFL arm from a standpoint. He could throw the ball with crazy velocity. And sometimes in the college game, that could hurt you, right? These college receivers don't always make those catches. And with Devin Leary and even Dane Key and Barryon Brown both talked about this, where the touch on his ball is just different and almost easier to catch than it was with Levis for some of these guys. So I've seen a lot of accuracy. You've definitely seen him already kind of develop as a leader. Obviously you got to walk in and get your, just come in and be the guy, but I think he's taken a slow and steady approach with that, and it's kind of worked out. And everyone we've talked to player wise has really gravitated towards him and liked him. So I think you're definitely going to see more the pro style guy from stand like Levis, but also a guy who's going to have more touch on his ball. And you got to keep him healthy, and that's in large part up to the offensive line, right? I think last year was a sack and he had the arm injury, and this year you got to just keep him upright and healthy, because as you mentioned, it was not good with Kai Sharon. It was not good with Destin Wade. And those are the backups again this year. So, and it's not really fair to those guys, especially Destin Wade, who was a true freshman and was redshirting all year and never even played until the bowl game. So, but still, you don't want to have to go down that road again. They didn't add anyone from the portal to be the backup this year. They added Leary to be the starter and to keep him healthy. And I've liked what I've heard and seen so far.
Awesome. Yeah, they've never really been a quarterback dependent type offense or team, but nobody can win, I guess, unless you're Kirk Ferentz with 30% success rate passing.
Right.
This receiving core, if we get to the end of the year and we say in the non-Georgia, non-LSU category amongst SEC receiving corps, is it crazy to think this is the third best or maybe fourth best with A&M?
I think so. It obviously have two really, really talented sophomores. Barryon Brown had 628 yards last year. That's setting a Kentucky receiving yard record for a freshman. Dane Key, the 6 touchdown passes, set the touchdown record. And then the X factor kind of is Tavion Robinson, who had some good years at Virginia Tech. And last year, he honestly didn't keep his head on straight. He was the guy that kind of went at Scangarillo on social media, and that got him unofficially suspended for the last game of the year. He was definitely not happy with his role in the offense, and it was just he didn't have a good year. He didn't do what they expected from him. But if they can get the Tavion Robinson that Virginia Tech had, and even maybe a little bit better, and that's your third guy, you got to feel pretty good about that. Especially Dane Key and Barryon Brown are both working to put on weight. I think that was the biggest thing for them as freshmen, is just competing with those tough SEC corners. But at the same time, Barryon Brown had 147 yards matched up with Kelly Ringo. This is a guy who could really play. So, and has elite speed. We saw the Ole Miss game. How many times could he have had a touchdown and missed it by one tackle? I definitely think from the top 3 standpoint, if all 3 guys are healthy and playing at their best, or at least Tavion Robinson's playing at his best, and they get close to or as much production from Key and a little more from Brown, I think, they're good. And then, Anthony Brown, a freshman that's coming in here, who was here for the spring ball, looked really, really good, and they think he's going to play right away. I don't expect him to redshirt. Shamar Porter's another high 4-star guy. I think top 200 recruit, maybe 250. He's going to be here this summer, and last year Barryon Brown came in the summer and found an immediate role. So if he comes in and impresses, I wouldn't be surprised if he's not an option. And then, tight end wise, if you want to throw them in the mix, I know, not going to count toward the wide receiver room, but they have some reliable options there too, especially with Jordan Dingle and Josh Caddis. So I think from a skill position standpoint, they're in pretty good shape, especially I think running back too, they're 3 deep. So I really like the skill room.
Yeah, Ray Davis, the kid they got from Vandy, I think is a really good SEC back. To me, it says something about what the receivers saw in spring camp that they didn't hit the portal, right? Like guys with that level of talent, if Leary looked really bad or if the offensive line just remained terrible, they probably leave, right? I know even though Stoops has good culture, but like you got to take care of yourself and go somewhere where you can actually catch the football and get downfield. So that offensive line, they brought in 3 transfers here. Marquez Cox from NIU, Cortland Ford, who got beat out by a transfer that USC took at like, and was, I was a little surprised that Kentucky took him. And I'm not trying to bag on the kid, but his numbers were worse than any Kentucky lineman last year. So like maybe they see something, they can coach him differently or something. And then Tanner Bowles from Alabama. Are any of those guys going to figure in as starters?
Cox for sure. Cox will be the starting left tackle. There's no doubt about it. And he's had a really good career. I know it's NIU, but he's had a great career. Started 33 games. The biggest thing at tackle last year is there was no experience, and then they had to slide Kenneth Horsey, who's been one of the best guards in the SEC. I think he was voted preseason third team last year, and they had to move him at left tackle. He is not a left tackle. He's not a tackle. Period. He's a guard. So he was playing out of position, and that was a nightmare. So they have him back for his sixth year at guard. So Marcus Cox is definitely your starting left tackle unless an injury happens or something. Right tackle, it's going to be Cortland Ford and Jeremy Flax battling it out. And like you said, Ford did not have a good year last year, but I think they just like the upside. And Flax didn't either. No. And you feel bad for the kid because he was finally starting to come on. He gets hurt at Ole Miss, and then the rest of the season, it was almost unplayable. So the right tackle spot's going to be a competition between those two guys. And, DeAndre Buford, who I actually thought stepped in and played pretty well against Georgia at left tackle. Kenneth Horsey went down 20 minutes before kickoff. And Buford had one of the best games of the year of anyone at a tackle spot, and he hit the portal. He's at Cincinnati now. So it's going to be between those guys, Flax and Ford. So we'll see. That's the biggest question on this offensive line is right tackle. And then Tanner Bowles, I think, is kind of going to be the guy who could fit in anywhere off the bench. I think, Eli Cox, Kenneth Horsey is a pretty good guard combination. I think the Jagger Burton is probably going to he's moving over from guard to center. I think he's going to start unless something really goes wrong during fall camp. So I would think the only one who's a first-year starter is Marcus Cox, but Cortland Ford probably is the second best odds of those three.
Awesome. So let's go ahead and switch over now to the defense, which really played admirably last year. Defensive line returns everybody but Justin Rogers, who I thought was awesome last year at times, and he goes to Auburn. That's kind of a transfer portal thing there. But they do pick up Keyshawn Silver from North Carolina. I'm curious, was he in for spring? How did he look?
Oh my God, he's huge. He's huge. Him and Deion Walker next to each other it was pretty fun to watch. I mean, those two guys, that's not a fun front four to deal with, or at least the front two there. So he looked really good. Mark Stoops was and what's interesting with Mark Stoops and how he likes Keyshawn Silver is he kind of talked about maybe overrating his team last year and kind of giving in too much hype. And this year he was like, I'm going to be careful about praising guys. He couldn't stop talking about Keyshawn Silver. So I got to think that's a pretty good sign. And then obviously I think Deion Walker, man, he's a guy who after this year, it's probably he's got to be a top defensive tackle in the SEC if he's not already the top guy now with Jalen Carter gone. I mean, the year he had last year, it's just a start for him. He's a monster, and the numbers are just going to get better and better. And he's actually even slimmed down a little bit and looks a little faster. Not much. He's still 340, but he did look a little faster from what we saw during spring camp. So him and Silver next to each other. And then, like you said, the whole defensive line room, which they didn't get enough sacks last year. And that's something they're kind of harping on getting better at. But there's a lot of continuity there. And the way Brad White does things, he usually has success.
So I'm a little, I don't know, not concerned, but that they lose names in that sort of edge and outside linebacker position that were, Square and Jones were hurt at times last year. And I thought that hurt Kentucky's defense. And they finished top 5 in the opponent adjusted stuff, which is tremendous.
Right.
They do lose Jordan Wright, who I think was the leading front step guy in terms of snaps taken. But you get Jackson, you get JJ Weaver, and you get Trevin Wallace, who
Wallace is beast. Yeah.
Yeah. Like it's his third year. He's an NFL guy. Do you expect a drop off from the backers, given who they lost, or do you think they can hold serve?
Not inside. I feel really good about inside because, like you said, they were hurt, and I thought Trevin Wallace was the best inside backer on last year team. Like nothing against Square. I love Square as just building a relationship with him. So if he hears this, it's nothing against him. But Trevin Wallace was the best player in that room last year. He's so fast. He comes downhill. That Missouri game, I think the first drive of the game, he had a sack and 2 tackles for loss, 3 and out. And Missouri, not a great offensive line, but not terrible. Nothing to scoff at. So he's just a guy who's been steady, getting better and better. We saw flashes as a true freshman, the kick return against Florida, obviously on the block kick. So, and then at linebacker last year, he was just incredible. So I feel pretty good about the inside backers, but outside, Jordan Wright has been a mainstay in this program for 4 or 5 years. which is, just college football in 2023. So JJ Weaver, they need him healthy, fully healthy. The last 2 years, he has not been. He came back off a torn ACL for the 21 season just 7 or 8 months after the fact, and he still led the team with 6 sacks, but you could tell he wasn't himself. And then last year, he got hurt against Youngstown State, hurt his elbow, and was not the same the rest of the year. So they need him 100% and getting after the quarterback. And then it's going to be up to guys like Keaton Wade, Tyrese Fairbury, some of the young guys to get to the quarterback. So the edge room, I'm a little concerned about for sure, but inside backers I feel good about.
So I guess the secondary is my main concern for this defense. You lose Keydron Smith, you lose Valentine, like both your corners, and they actually stayed healthy and rated pretty well.
Really good.
700 snaps for each. That's hard to find. And then you lose. I can't say the kid's name right.
Tyrell Asian.
Yeah, that's a decent bit to address. And I love Stoops' defensive coaching in the secondary. He rarely has a bad secondary, but that is quite a bit to lose. They take J.Q. Hardaway from Cincinnati. I don't know. I shouldn't ask what level of drop back are you expecting here, but are you expecting a drop back? And if so, how big?
Every year I say so. I remember 2018, they lost Lonnie Johnson, Derek Beatty, Darius West, and Mike Edwards in the same year. And you were like, oh my God, the secondary next year is going to be a mess. They were the only team in college football that year not to allow 10 touchdowns other than Ohio State through the air. They had the second best secondary in the country in yards per game, only behind Ohio State. So I'm never going to doubt Mark Stoops when it comes to the secondary after that. Like you mentioned, J.Q. Hardaway, I think, is going to be an impact guy. They do return 3 safeties. Jordan Lovett played almost all season last year after Jalen Geiger went down against Florida, and he played really, really well at the end of the year. Had a couple picks toward the end of the season and just was steady and knew where to be, assignment sound and all that. Geiger will be back this fall toward ACLs, so we'll see how he comes back. And then Zion Childers at safety, he really came on at the end of the year. He had a sack against Louisville. He had a couple tackles for loss at the end of the year. He's I think he's probably better in the box, but he's a guy that they kind of talk about being a leader and can kind of do a little bit of everything. Really high IQ guy, high school quarterback down in the Houston area. So he'll play a lot at safety, but cornerback is the one. We got to see it, right? Andrew Phillips, who kind of played a lot in the nickel. I think he's going to have to stay in the nickel because he was good there. And just other guys, they didn't seem very happy with how they were performing in the nickel during spring camp. So I expect him to probably be the nickel. I expect J.Q. Hardaway probably to get one of the outside spots. And then that second outside spot is up for grabs. A guy like Maxwell Harrison, who has the length they like, but no experience. And we know his one play last year, Carrington Valentine came out of the game, and it was that play against Vanderbilt on 4th and 11 that Will Shepard burned him on that 40-yard go ball, just a jump ball that he beat him to the spot and then set up the winning touchdown for the Commodores. So that's a guy who's going to be in the mix. If he had a pretty good spring from what I've heard, but they're still looking for some consistency from him. And then guys like Jansen Dunn, a guy they got up from Ohio State, transfer there too. So we'll see. The cornerback room is going to be really interesting. But again, I can't doubt them too much because every time they've had a lot of people leave, they've stepped right up to the plate. I don't think they're going to have the second best passing defense in America like they did in 2019, but I can't predict a humongous drop-off just based off past couple of years here.
They will likely have some time to gel if you look at the schedule.
Yes.
Ball State, Eastern Kentucky, Akron, Vanderbilt, Florida. You will get until October 7th before you have to go play Georgia, which
Eastern Kentucky's quarterback's probably the best quarterback they're going to play the first 4 weeks unless A.J. Swan makes a huge jump.
Yeah, exactly right. And then, Missouri, not a great passing game. Tennessee, probably will be. Mississippi State's got an experienced guy. Bama.
It's Bama.
Who knows? At South Carolina and at Louisville. The back half of this, they better get that secondary right. But they should rack up some wins early on in the season. I assume it's offensive line, but if it's not, give me an answer on this. Where's the biggest drop-off between the starters and the backups? The spot they just have to stay healthy with the starters. Not quarterback, obviously.
It's got the offense line's the easy answer, so I'll go with that definitely being one, but it's probably what we just talked about too at corner. I mean, I don't know who it's going to be yet, but I think J.Q. Hardaway, probably Andrew Phillips, they got to keep him healthy because if they don't have him in the nickel or even to pop outside, he was a guy that was really coming on last year too and had a really, really good spring from what we saw and heard. So they can't lose Andrew Phillips. They probably can't lose Hardaway. And then I don't really know who's going to step up. If it's Harrison, if it's Jordan Robinson, a D2 transfer from last year who kind of got the red shirt. So I would say corner, just because offensive line. At least you did add Tanner Bowles. And one of those right tackles, Flax or Ford, whoever doesn't win the job. Not saying they're great, but they'll have experience. Ben Chrisman, another offensive line transfer they added from Ohio State to build some depth there. So I'll say corner just because there is a little more depth on the offensive line than last year, but it's a toss-up between the two.
So what would you say is, well, did they pursue more guys in the transfer portal at defensive back?
They did over the winter portal. They added Jansen Dunn, they added JQ Hardaway, and then they only added one in this cycle, and that was Carl Larkins, who actually, just like Jordan Robinson last year, is a D2 guy from Livingstone, both of them. And he is interesting where he's 6'4", he's got the size that Mark Stoops loves. He had 8 picks in 9 games last year, the most of anyone in D2. But the question is he really going to play right away, or is he going to take a redshirt year, kind of like his teammate from Livingstone, Jordan Robinson, did this year? So that was the only one they added after spring ball. I know they really wanted Antonio Carter out of Rhode Island, but it became Notre Dame, LSU, I think Florida, and they just kind of bowed out and said, we'll stick with what we got. So they got to feel pretty good because Kentucky the last couple of years, when they see a spot to upgrade in the portal, and Mark Stoops said this, he's coming to take your job with guys in the portal. Like, he doesn't care if feelings are hurt, people who leave for the portal. He's trying to upgrade his roster. So they've added a lot of guys through the portal after spring. They've just hit their scholarship number with the addition of the running back from NC State, Sumo Karanjabi, yesterday. So they must feel pretty good about the secondary depth, and that's why I'm like, I can't doubt them because they've gotten it right before.
So, I mean, I think there's probably a signal to that, right? I look at teams, I look at who they're offering in the portal, who they're going after, and if you're offering everybody under the sun at the portal at one position, you may not feel very good about your ball club there. But
right.
So the fact they're only going after guys that went to like Notre Dame and that type of stuff, that's generally a good signal they like what they have, probably. So
I think so. Yeah, I do think so. And obviously the offense line, they didn't love what they had because they added 4 guys and they let David Wallabog, they let DeAndre Buford go without really fighting them. So I think, like I said, I think he's kind of, and quarterback, clearly they made a huge upgrade. So they didn't leave anything up for grabs that they felt bad about. They weren't going in like last year where they felt pretty questionable in some areas.
Awesome. All right. Really appreciate it, Aaron. And we'll have everybody check out CatsPause. A tremendous job. Let's go visit them.